Hello and welcome. I am Alan, and today we are going to talk about the opening of Fallout 1 and giving it an analysis like we have for other openings of Fallout. Let's kind of get right into this. I've already done Fallout 1 before, but I figured since I was a little further along, had better footage this time, I'd redo it. Um, Now, Fallout 1 was released in 1997 by Interplay Studios, not Black Isle. I've heard this misconception spread by some people. Most of the people that would form Black Isle would be a part of Interplay. But as of yet, Black Isle had not yet formed. So it did not work on 1. It was not yet even a division of Interplay um, Studios. Now, this was meant to be originally a sequel to a game called Wasteland, which was the prior release for Interplay. And is of itself still around and just recently released Wasteland 3. So, uh, the game, though, itself opens with a active version of the Interplay logo. We see the rocket encircle the Interplay logo, or we see the rocket encircle the planet with the company's logo, by gamers, for gamers. Um, what follows is an introduction to the game. Um, as we see the title, we hear a record needle kind of make contact with an actual record. If you've ever heard that kind of, you'll hear the record needle make contact with the actual record itself and produce that noise. Um, and One of the things you'll notice with this introduction to Fallout, while it does kind of show up the way Fallout 3 or some of the other Fallouts have, it's not as tattered and worn as 3 is. But anyway, at that point, we kind of see a vault dweller watering a flowering plant of some kind, and we hear a song start up, which is actually Maybe by the Ink Spots. They originally wanted to get I Don't Want to Set the World on Fire by the Ink Spots, but this didn't happen in time for the release of the game. And so we instead have Maybe. It's the only um, record song, recorded recorded song for the game we have. The rest of them are the ambient music and sound of the game itself. Now, once we see the Vault Dweller watering the plant, we see um, him waving goodbye as the vault door itself closes. Just, you know, hey, here's a little introduction of what you're going to be seeing. And the very next thing we see is an advertising or an advertisement for an underground vault, which this piece is a great introduction to the nostalgia, the Americana, the feel of late 1940s through the 1950s that Fallout was meant to represent. Very Cold War era, you know, good with the bad. The picture shown is of a cutaway of a mountain with a vault set inside. Above the mountain is the advertising slogan, "The Vault of the Future." And then behind the mountain, you see the mushroom clouds. While in front, you see a couple looking back with the smiles on their faces. They're on the left-hand side, and she's dressed up in the very 1950s regalia um, style of dress, while he's got that smoking pipe in his mouth, and they've got these big smiles saying, "We're still protected." That's kind of the feeling they're giving off, like, we know a secret. But on the other side, on the right hand side, it says, "Call now." And it actually has a telephone number from before the telephone numbers had their modern numbering system. Before they had area code followed by a region code followed by the 4-digit number. They used to have a 2-letter or 3-letter number for the town, followed by 4 numbers for who you were trying to reach. It was before we had really organized the telephone system. But next, let's find out a bit about Vault 13 itself, which we do know is the vault from the game, um, based on the door that the vault dweller's behind when it closes, and then the advertisement of the people trying to go into the mountain. Because according to information, Vault 13 is supposed to be under Mount Whitney, California, which is the tallest mountain in California and in the contiguous U.S. So, not including Alaska and Hawaii. It's just southeast of Mariposa. So Mariposa is to the north and west of it. It's just east of Fresno. So, and just northeast of Bakersfield, which in the Fallout universe becomes the necropolis. Anyway, afterwards we see a rocket rotate around the Earth behind the name Galaxy News, followed by the headline, "Our dedicated boys keep the peace in the newly annexed Canada." And that's followed by footage of men in power armor executing a man in combat armor. This again plays to the feeling of the 1950s, nostalgia mixed with the reality of what went on. Um, so you still have, oh, the news is before movies, the little bulletins and everything. Um, it seems like a simpler time, but everyone's killing each other and committing atrocities for oil, for the resources, and we'll soon get to that. The news footage itself is of two soldiers in power armor, um, and they have a Canadian freedom fighter in combat armor with his hands tied behind him. Um, and the one pulls out a pistol and executes the Canadian freedom fighter. And it really drives home the point of how the U.S. has annexed Canada to protect, in quotation marks, Alaska. And it's all from China. Of course, we know why this would happen is because Alaska is bordered by British Columbia and the Yukon Territory, the western portion of Canada. So I could very easily see an attempt to invade Alaska. Now, the you actually put it in the Fallout universe with the jumpy atmosphere. Um, but yeah, the annexation and invasion only makes sense in that context. I mean, I'm not saying it's right, but it does make sense in a way based on that universe's setup. Uh, this is followed by Soldier in power armor. We get a close up of the power armor helmet, and behind it we see a pre-war flag waving behind him, and then a suggestion to buy war bonds. The American flag does show the 13 Commonwealths surrounding the nation's single larger representative star um, on the American flag. So you have the 13 commonwealths surrounding a single star, which we had a similar version earlier in American existence where it was just the 13 colonies. There was no single star in the middle, but you had the 13 colonies on just the flag, so the 13 original states. Um, this prompts a slow draw away from the TV. Speaking of the 13 colonies, just a remembrance here, it's probably an attempt to promote American um, pride over their independence. That's why they probably made it so similar. So they probably made it so similar to the original American 13 states, which were in a circle like that, but just had no star in the middle. That's probably why it was made so similar on purpose to produce American patriotism, American fervor for who they were. Especially in a Cold War era. But anyway, like I was saying, this prompts a slow draw away from the TV, in which we see a radiation king and it plays commercials. These include a Corvega commercial that shows the staggering inflation firsthand. Um, but it's without. But it's with that. After that commercial, we see what follows is another commercial, and it focuses more on the technological marvels. So even these commercials do play a part. They show the bad and the good of the Fallout universe. You see the exaggerated inflation, the Chrysler Corvega, the price is way up there. What was it, $199,999.99 on a very bare bones vehicle, because you notice they said no technology, no this, no that, wanting to emphasize it was very much like original cars. But then afterwards you see Mr. Handy, and he is part of that technological marvel we kind of expected our futures to be. Like the Jetsons, the Rosie the robots. You know, these amazing robots floating around doing chores. Or as it said, walking the dog. But anyway, um, but then we see at this point outside of the commercials, we see the background, which is a devastated and destroyed apartment building that the TV's sitting in, with a a city in destruction outside of it, which is supposedly in that setting was supposed to be Bakersfield, California, which again we know becomes the necropolis. Yeah, I believe it's Bakersfield. This is if I remember correctly. The Mr. Handy commercial starts to stutter and turn off as the Ink Spots song that had been playing this entire time up to this moment does the same. We hear it go, but maybe, 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 maybe. And the screen fades to black. The next time the screen comes up, we hear Ron Perlman himself giving it start the beginnings of a speech, which are backed by a collection of images from World War II to really emphasize the beginning point of the Fallout universe. The first image is the Reichstag after the fall of Berlin, 1945. After that is American troops at the Ludendorff Bridge in 1945, followed by St. Paul's Cathedral during the London Blitz in 1940. Then the sinking of the USS Arizona at Pearl Harbor in 1941, which is the primary catalyst that brought us into war. We didn't do near as much as the fighting that had been already going on, but that's another story. Next is a Buy War Bonds poster. You know, you have Uncle Sam saying, I want you, and he's got that flag behind him. And that's it. The poster itself is from 1942. Then next, we see the nuclear component. It's the Trinity gadget, the testing of the first nuclear bomb. But it was called the Trinity gadget. And the picture's from 1945. And the following image is the detonation of the Trinity gadget from 1945 as well. And of course, we had the famous line um, from one of the scientists who worked on it. I believe it was Werner von Braun. I may be incorrect on that. So I would have to look that back up. But he says, I am become death, destroyer of worlds. Which, of course, is a quote um, from the Bhagavad Gita. I was trying to look that up, I believe, last night in my copy of the Bhagavad Gita. Um, but I've yet to find it. course, I wasn't going over it in full depth or detail. I'll have to reread it with a little more of a um, definitive look at it. Now, the next image we see is that of the 255th Infantry Regiment in Waldenburg, Germany. And that was the last image we see. It's from 1945 as well. But like I said, all these images were tied together to show how much or how we reached the nuclear age. You know, that's kind of the tying point, World War II. All this while we hear Ron Perlman's speech. And let's take a look at that speech. It begins with the famous tagline for the series, War. War never changes. And as I've said, this has become synonymous with the Fallout series. It's just the tagline you always hear. The Romans waged war to gather slaves and wealth. Spain built an empire from its lust for gold and territory. Hitler shaped a battered Germany into an economic superpower. But war never changes. And this just shows that the tools and the reasons we may give for wars may change, but war itself has seemingly been a constant throughout mankind's history. In the 21st century, war was still waged over the resources that could be acquired. Only this time, the spoils of war were also its weapons, petroleum and uranium. For these resources, China would invade Alaska, the US would annex Canada, and the European Commonwealths would dissolve into quarreling, bickering nation-states bent on controlling the last remaining resources on Earth. And this tells us the events that set the Great War in motion. Petroleum and uranium is what we sought. It was the resources, the fuel to keep our societies going, but it also kept our weapons primed and ready in the Fallout universe. So, and of course, it gives us everything we need to know pre-Great War. China invading Alaska, the US annexing Canada, and the European Commonwealth once again devolving into separate nations. So it became a very much friendships out the window, every nation for itself situation. In 2077, the storm of World War had come again. In 2 brief hours, most of the planet was reduced to cinders. From the ashes of nuclear devastation, a new civilization would struggle to arise. So, this tells you the Great War was short, but the devastation that it wrought was immense. And it really sets the world that Fallout itself is set in. Um, a few were able to reach the relative safety of the large underground vaults. Your family was part of that group that entered Vault 13. Imprisoned safely behind a large vault door under a mountain of stone, a generation has lived without knowledge of the outside world. Life in the vault is about to change. And that really sets the stage for your game. Those last three sections there. You have pre-Great War, what all happened and led up to the Great War, the Great War itself, and the devastation it wrought on humanity, plus the attempt of the remaining life on Earth to rebuild. And that really shows us a great look at the opening of the original Fallout. We see a lot in this single opening. I mean, there's some unused information that a lot of people don't really look at when you talk about the openings. And it does provide more than you would think. And one of the things you'll notice is they want to set that Americana, that nostalgia feel, but show the devastation and destruction that has led up to this point. But anyway, I hope you have enjoyed. But as always, educate thyself. Think, read, study, learn. And I appreciate y'all watching. And I hope to see you in the next video. But until then, later.